Well, good morning. I want to welcome everyone to the next event in Indian Affairs and the Department of Interior's National Native American Heritage Month 2019 celebration. My name is Charles Addington. I'm the Deputy Bureau Director for the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Justice Services and the MC for this morning's event, which is followed by a demonstration at 11:30 in the Bison Bistro by DJ Smalling, the Choctaw Nation artist who was the keynote speaker at our Heritage Month event last year. Today's program is entitled Red Shawl Day, and in keeping with this year's theme, Honor the Past, Embrace the Future, among those we want to honor and embrace during our Heritage Month celebration and Indian countries missing and murdered. This morning we will hear from the Assistant Secretary for Indian Affairs, Tara Katuk Sweeney, and our main presenter, Gwen Casero, who is one of our victim specialists with the BIA Office of Justice Services Victim Assistance Program in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The OJS Color Guard will conduct the posting of the colors, and the OJS Drum Group will accompany them with a flag song. Spike Bighorn, Associate Deputy Bureau Director for the BIA Office of Indian Services, will offer the blessing. If everyone would please stand for the posting of the colors and remain standing for the flag song, the national anthem, and the blessing.
Thank you, Charlie, for asking me to be a part of this event today. Again, my name is Spike Bighorn. I'm the Associate Deputy Bureau Director for the Office of Indian Services here at the BIA. Before I offer the blessing, I want to thank the drum group for sharing a beautiful song with us, and also I'd like to thank the Color Guard for the ceremony this morning. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your blessings as we celebrate our unique and distinct cultures during this Native American Heritage event. We ask you to be with us today and throughout the holiday season, keeping our families, friends, and loved ones safe and secure. We pray that you will provide safe travel to all our guests and visitors with us today as they return to their homes across the country. We are thankful for their willingness to share their expertise and experiences with us during this important event. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for all the blessings you bestowed upon us as we say, Amen.
Thank you so much, Spike. Please be seated. It is my great honor to welcome our first speaker, Assistant Secretary Tara Katuk Sweeney.
Good morning. I would like to say good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction to the drum group. I'm always so humbled to listen to your songs, and you can feel the spirit as you participate in these types of events. So I'm very, very thankful. And to the Color Guard, always representing the best of our Native communities, the service to our country, something that I'm extremely proud of and very grateful for your participation and representation as well. Hello to everyone and welcome to the Indian Affairs and the Department of the Interior's 2019 Native American Heritage Month celebration. I want to thank you for joining us today. As you've seen throughout this month, we had Eskimo Ninja Warrior Nick Hansen from Unalakleet, Alaska, and with him, he brought his motivational speaking skills and insight, as well as the demonstration of traditional Native games. It was an honor to have him. We also participated in the Rock Your Mock celebration on November 15th, and all over social media you could see the lovely moccasins that were worn throughout the Indian Affairs family from here in DC all the way to the West Coast, something that I was following on social media and was very, very proud to see the representation of who we are and why we are Native people and the pride that so many folks displayed. We also had an opportunity to hear from Brigadier General Joni Matthews during our Veterans Honoring Day program and talk about a woman who's kind of shattering that glass ceiling, and her representation of women in the military is something for all of us to be proud of. And today is Red Shawl Day, when we bring attention to Indian country's missing and murdered victims. Through our theme, Honor the Past and Embrace the Future, we honor and embrace the victims and the survivors of domestic violence and crime while we work to address the causes that leave them vulnerable to predators. Earlier this year, I'm extremely proud that President Trump declared May 5th Missing and Murdered American Indian and Alaska Native Awareness Day. It's something that I've had an opportunity to work on, and I want to recognize the partnership and the hard work of someone that I'm proud to call my leader and friend, the Deputy Secretary nominee, Catherine McGregor. If you could please stand up. And in honor of Red Shawl Day, Kate is wearing traditional Inupiaq, what we call a tikhluk. It's an Inuit snow shirt that was made by Bobby Itta from Utqalvik. So thank you for wearing that. It looks great. And so Earlier this year, we had the presidential proclamation, and the point of that was to draw attention to the horrible acts of violence committed against American Indians and Alaska Native people, particularly women and children. Indian Affairs and the Department of the Interior continue to work with departmental, tribal, and local law enforcement to address violence and illicit drug activity in Indian country. This year, we held 3 events titled Reclaiming Our Native Communities. We held one in Sackatoon, Arizona, on the Gila River Indian Reservation. We held 2 in Alaska, both in Bethel and in Nome, and in a 3rd location, Rapid City, South Dakota. And again, the purpose of these events was to bring together tribal leadership and community advocates to find solutions, to create a path forward on how we're going to address violent crimes in Indian country, the cold cases that have gone unsolved for many years, and of course the illicit drug activity that we're finding an increase in Indian country, in addition to the epidemic of missing and murdered Native Americans. Our Office of Justice Services has been hard at work leading a joint opioid reduction task force to combat the opioid crisis that is afflicting our communities. And the task force has already seen many successes disrupting drug rings in and around tribal communities. And I'm very, very proud of the work that OJS conducts in this area. We are also proud of the inaugural public safety roundtable that was held earlier this year in Albuquerque in August. And the purpose was to identify and coordinate public safety resources for Indian country and to discuss public safety priorities with our federal partners. We also continue to work with the Department of Justice and our federal partners to focus federal attention to Indian country cold cases, violent crimes, and missing and murdered natives. In addition to identifying and prosecuting offenders and to bring justice to violent crime victims and their families. In honoring our past, we remember all of Indian country's missing and murdered victims, as well as those whose lives, families, and communities have been devastated by the drugs and illicit drug activity in our communities and violence. In embracing our future, we will work with tribal leaders and our partners at the local, state, and federal levels to protect our children, girls and boys, from falling prey to anyone who would do them harm and to help those who have been harmed. As part of our efforts to bring awareness to our public safety resources, this morning's presentation will be about the assistance OJS provides to Indian country's victims of violence. So please join me in welcoming Gwen Casero, Laguna Pueblo, of the OJS Victim Assistance Program.
Good morning, everyone. Goatsi Sehopa. I am from the Pueblo of Laguna. My name is Gwen Casero, and I am stationed in Phoenix, Arizona, where previously I was in Montana on the Crow and Northern Cheyenne reservations, providing victim assistance to any identified victim of a crime. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor on National Native American Heritage Month to discuss these issues that victims do encounter, the support that they need, or the lack of support that they do have. It is a huge role that we have in servicing victims across the United States. It's a program that we hope will build, and we have more victim services, victim specialists in different reservations. Today we honor the missing and murdered Native Americans. It is an initiative that is very important to families because we have encountered families where their loved ones have been missing. So BIA OJS established the Victim Assistance Program in 2008. This program was established with the Department of Drug Enforcement, and the initial was to help the endangered children in the homes, to provide services to the families where there's this drug addiction in the homes, where there is a need for the families to try and get the care they need when they are in these situations. The program has grown to where we do have victim specialists in the Dakotas, more in Montana, southern Colorado and Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. So I call these my brothers and sisters because we are very close. We do learn from one another on what we do for our communities. And it's a huge deal to us because we've all grown up on reservations. We've all seen and grown up with the trauma, with what people need. The alcoholism, the domestic violence, the sexual assaults. I know when I first started as a victim advocate in Laguna, I just really couldn't believe these things were happening on my reservation. And I really wanted to try to show the victims that I encountered that there are services, that people do care, that people are there to support them through this traumatic event that is probably the worst day of their life. So today we're going to review the Montana Native American Fatality Review Team, look into the missing and murdered Native American investigations and services we provide, and recognize historical trauma and how it still relates to our victims that we service today in our communities. So Montana has a domestic fatality review team. Their mission is to look deeply into a case to get to know the victim and the suspect and the issues that they were going through. I was lucky to be, I was able to participate in a meeting at one of the places I serviced in Montana. When you see this team, they are so invested on what they can do next and how they can help these communities with fatalities of domestic violence. They staff a case so thoroughly. They see that there's issues from the victim and the suspect that they need to address because there are some unresolved issues that they have faced in their lives where they have been a victim before, and most of these people have been victims of sexual assault. And they notice that when these issues are not addressed, they carry it with them through their lives. And they continue to carry it, and they begin to cope in different ways. And when they cope, we see them with use of alcohol, use of drugs, leaving days at a time because they're trying to cope with what they're going through. So the board it was awesome to see what they do. It was awesome to see that they have this big heart to know that something needs to be done about these deaths that result from domestic violence. So when they do these meetings, the data is specific to Indian country. And it helps to educate about what leads to the domestic violence deaths. When you see them working on these things, when I was sitting in that meeting, they really wanted to get to the core of what happens in their lives, like I said before, in order to educate the key people that encounter our suspects and victims of domestic violence, which are our judges, our law enforcement, our CPS workers with social services, our tribal leaders who need to know in their communities that this is happening to them, that this is very prevalent and something that needs to be addressed. So the uniqueness of this review board is that, like I said, it's all data for Indian country. We all know that the domestic violence relationship is very difficult. We see our victims go back and forth to their perpetrator. And we have to approach them in a non-judgmental manner to give them support. So in this review team, they want to make people aware of signs, red flags, that it's not just behind closed doors, that it needs to be out in the open. And that we ourselves need to probably do a welfare check on a family member. How are they doing? Reaching out to them. Of course, we know this is difficult because of the control, because they still go back and we think, is this what they want in their lives? When really this is all they know. This is all they have. This is the person they love. And this is the person that provides for them and their family. When you give that non-judgmental respect, support, at least they know they can come back to you. I always think of a victim in Crow that I serviced. She didn't want to turn her husband in, but no matter what, when she needed information or updates, she was calling me. Whenever she needed some support, I'm going through this, at least she knew I was there to support her in a non-judgmental manner. So let's keep the door open. Let's open this and talk about it openly, because we do not want any more deaths in our communities. And that is the ultimate goal of the review team, to have no more domestic violent deaths in Montana's Indian country. They also want to make it nationally known. They also want to share all the stats, all the data they've collected. Because the team, one of my coworkers, Wendy, who is on the review board, told me and Linda when we were getting ready for this presentation about how they are talking about the murder and missing Native Americans. And if they intimately talked about these people, would it help prevent them being missing? Will it help prevent them being deceased? Because like I told you, they intimately look into the victim and the suspect's lives. So this is a model that I think that they're seeing. How much can they contribute to MMNA? So I didn't really elaborate on what we do when I talked about the establishment of the Victim Assistance Program, because we have slides that talk about the role of the victim specialist. We're on the ground 24/7. We work with our agents, we work with our law enforcement in order to get victim assistance. We're there in the middle of the night with them. And the reason why is because they need the emotional support. Usually these people don't have anybody. They don't have anyone with them, or they don't want to tell anybody about what's going on with them. So when we have a victim identified, we usually have dispatch call us out, or an agent, to let us know of the situations. And the major crimes that we encounter are sexual assault, domestic violence, strangulation, homicides, assaults resulting in serious bodily injury. Sorry if I'm getting emotional, because this is at the time when they really need someone to support them. This is a time where they feel they have nobody. And when you do encounter them, you have to build this quick rapport with them. This is the first time they're meeting you, and they're wondering who the heck you are. However, though, when you break it down to them that you're there to support them, that you're there for them through this traumatic event, like I said, it's probably the worst day of their life, that you're there to help support them and understand what's going on. So we run into victims, like I said, domestic violence, very vulnerable people with stalking, sexual assault, child abuse, and human trafficking. And it all depends on the communities that we are working with. It all depends in the states that we are. So we really got to research and assess where we're at and see what kind of services that need to be provided. Also to give the technical assistance to the tribal communities on what is needed. So I have unfortunately had met a family where they had a missing loved one. I came in very late into the game because the mom was persistent on knowing or wanting to find out what was next on her daughter's investigation. She ended up at the chief of police's door, asking tons of questions, And in the beginning, when I found out that her daughter was missing, I tried myself to reach out to her, went to her house, left her notes. But when they're in this state, when they're wondering where their loved one is, they're not even looking at that information. They're not even thinking that this is a person that could help them. They are so much wanting to find their loved one. When I was trying to reach out to her, she was out trying to find her family member, her daughter, out with the people that were trying to search and see where she was last seen at. And when I was finally able to talk to the mom and finally able to meet with her, it wasn't just her. She had 14 family members in the home wanting to know what was going on. The mom, she just wanted to know. She just wanted updates. And I totally got that because us as victim specialists, we work with our law enforcement. We work with our agents and our officers on the ground. And we always communicate about what's going on next, what has happened. So I gained knowledge and an update from the chief of police, FBI, because I knew I was going to have this meeting. Because when you talk to the families, it's always about information. What's going on next? What's going to happen? So in that meeting, you have family members asking specific questions. And I think this is where we're important because we can explain the reasons why we don't discuss in detail what's happening on the investigation. We can help them to understand that in the integrity of the case, to do right by their loved one, that law enforcement wants to get it right. That law enforcement wants to make sure the right information is given to them, and that they do the best of their ability to figure out what has happened to their loved one. And when you explain this process, then they'll ask, so when can we talk to you again? And this is where you educate them about, you can call me anytime. You can ask questions anytime. Because it's about your loved one, it's about your family. And you can share the contact information of who you're working with. I give out my card all the time. Told you we're 24/7. Have a phone with me all the time. I get calls through the night, just questions, updates, because in the last minute they're thinking, I need to ask this question. This is really something I want to find out. So when you share this information on who the person is that's investigating, which was FBI, in joint with BIA, I gave them all the contact info. But the mother was so much advocating for her daughter, she was already at the department anyway, asking questions, wanted to see what was going to happen next. So you have to have hard conversations with them. And that is the hard part of this job, is when you're telling them you're either going to come back with news that they'll be happy about, or you're going to be the bearer of bad news. That is why the rapport, the relationship, the services, the support, the emotional support you give them is in place. In that they are educated on who's investigated, how can I contact them, who am I going to be able to talk to when I have questions. And unfortunately, with this case, it wasn't a crime. And that was the hardest conversation I had to have with the mom. When we were trying to get updates with FBI, I was informing her, I'll help you. I'll send emails, I'll do my own phone calls. Let's see if you can get the actual update, see if the case is actually closed based off of what we know. And she was very persistent, like I said. She wasn't going to let up. She wants something for her daughter. And that's something I know I'll never change, but I'm going to support her through that. I'm going to be there with her. Because when I would just do regular check-ins, how are you doing? It would depend. I'm having a day. I'm missing her. Huge part of them's missing. Because when they were gone and they found them deceased and they had passed on, that's something they don't get back. And they always talk about that. So if ever I checked in on the phone and I could tell she needed further support, I would go to her home. I would sit with her. I would give her the time that she needed in order to talk about this case, in order to talk about her feelings, to talk about the hurt, the anger, or even to honor them, or to tell me about who they were as a person. And the hardest thing for her is that she is raising her grandchildren. How do I talk to them? What do I tell them about their mom? And as natives, we still continue to talk about how you need to honor them, how you need to still say this is who your parent was. So she's going on to raise her grandchildren. And those are services that we can give. We can show them what they can do in the court system, give them the paperwork, help assist giving them the sources that they need, showing them how the court paperwork looks like and what the meaning of the paperwork is. Some of those wordings, we know we don't understand sometimes. So our assistance is very vital in that too. So when the mom finally got a call from FBI on the update that the case was closed, she called me. She was in tears, and I just pushed everything aside to go see her, just to sit and talk to her. She let me know about how the conversation went, what they had told her that the case is closed. And this, again, is where it was really important for me to explain the reasons behind it. And when we talked about it being closed because of how she had passed on from the reports, it still wasn't going to change her mind that she was still going to do what she could for her daughter in honoring her to say this is what happened to her. Because the hardest thing that we do in these situations, law enforcement and us, are the rumors. Rumors fly around all the time. And I always tell them, if you hear something and you feel it's not right, give me a call. Let's get it situated. Let's get it figured out. And believe me, those calls come in. Because in our small communities, we hear a lot of stuff that they want to make sure they have the right info. So it's always reassuring them. If you haven't heard it from us, law enforcement, our program, question it. Call us. Ask us what's going on. This mother, with the services that I gave her, she was actually referring people to me now, telling people who to contact when they had questions of a case in the police department. So that goes to show how important our program is, how we help them through this process of trying to understand all this jargon that we use and understand, that we can at least give them the explanation of what those terms mean. It has to be broken down, because when you're talking to them too, they're still in crisis sometimes. They're still hurting. They're still in a state where they're trying to figure out what's going on. Just recently in my new service area, it was hard to talk to a family because we had to identify the missing person. And explaining to them it may take months until they're identified, and giving them the reasons why and how come. And explaining why we only talk to a next of kin, which is either the wife, a husband, a mom or a dad, brother or sister. And all our information was going to the wife in this case, when in reality, they had family members that wanted information too. So I had a sister call in pretty upset because she wasn't given any information. But I explained to her how she's not the identified next of kin, and she understood it. And I told her how I had to gain approval from the wife in order to talk about the case, which was no big deal. The wife still wanted the brothers and sisters to know what was happening. She actually wanted them to take the lead on what was going on, because it was so traumatic for her, because she felt she failed him by not knowing where he was. She thought she failed him by just letting him take off and not look for him. So when we went and did the formal death notification, she didn't want to hear it. I actually went into a room with her just to process what she was going through. She was just crying. She was happy that we were able to identify him. She was happy that there was no trauma to him. However, though, she just didn't want to hear it. And we let her know that was okay. She wasn't ready to hear it. I explained to her, down the road, there will be a time you are ready to hear this information. There is a time when you're going to ask us what happened, or to request reports on what happened to him. And she got it, but she still said, I'd rather have the brothers and sisters take the lead. This is too much. I feel like I failed him. Even explaining to her, you didn't fail him. You were still there. You still loved him. You still supported him. But the idea that she didn't put an effort in is how she felt into seeing what was wrong or where he was at. The families want to honor their loved ones. I know in the two cases, they wanted to know if the scene was cleared, making sure that they can go back and make some type of memorial for them. And we got to honor that. In talking about the mom with the daughter, this was so upsetting. So the funeral home knows the Crow tradition of burning clothes, knowing that that's what they do. But the funeral home burned them for her. She was so upset because she wasn't given the opportunity to do it herself, because this was the last stuff she was wearing. This was the last stuff she was seen in, and she wanted it to put some closure to herself and what she was going through with missing her daughter. And we got to honor that, because in talking to her, when they found her, they knew that her belongings were all over the place in the scene. And she wanted that stuff back. And she was very specific on those items. She could tell you to the T what was in her purse. She wanted her driver's license. I want a picture back that I used for you guys to put her on the news. That was so important for her to get back. So that's why we always coordinate with our counterparts. And I worked with the FBI victim specialists to make sure these belongings were returned back to her, because that was closure for her. That was something she wanted back. And when she received it back, she was so thankful. And that's all it takes, is just the time with them, just to know what they want, just to know what this needs to give. And I think I went through this about how we respond and how we take care of a victim. I could go on and on. I really could. So we did talk about historical trauma and how it is still in our communities and how it still impacts families that we service, because we see generational domestic violence and sexual assault. And we need to be respectful of what they go through. And so in our communities, we got to know what's going on in order to give them the services that are needed to be provided to them. But today, let's honor our missing and murdered Native American brothers and sisters, because communities don't forget them. Communities do walks for them. Communities do things in order to remember them. So let's honor them today. I wish I could speak more and tell you more, because really the stories are what are impactful with what we do. So thank you for the honor of being here. Here's our contact information for the program. If you have any questions, I'll be around, or if you want to just talk, I'll be in the area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gwen. And I'd like to thank the Assistant Secretary Sweeney for her opening remarks, and thank Gwen for that great presentation. At this time, I would ask for you all to please stand and remain standing for an honor song to be performed by the OJS Drum Group for all missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. They will be accompanied by Katie and Erica Eisenach, Rosebud, Lakota, who will dance for all missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. Thank you so much, Katie and Erica. Please remain standing for the retiring of the colors by the OJS Color Guard and songs performed by the OJS Drum Group. Please be seated. I want to thank the Assistant Secretary Sweeney, Gwen Casero, Katie and Erica Eisenach, the OJS Color Guard, Lieutenant Sean Smith, Lieutenant Justin Apachito, Lieutenant Derwin Cleveland, and Officer Jerome Maribal, and to the OJS Drum Group, Travis LeBeau, Eddie Epler, Jose Figueroa, and Lance Fisher from our Office of Self-Governance. For each of you for being here today and for joining us in remembering and honoring all missing and murdered American Indians and Alaska Natives. As a reminder, to complete the Heritage Months, the schedule can be found on posters located at the entrance of the main interior building. You can also visit our website at indianaffairs.gov and click on Native American Heritage Month 2019 on the right side of the homepage. This concludes this morning's event. For those here in DC, be sure to see DJ Smalling at 11:30 today in the Bison Bistro for his highly informative art demonstration. And remember that tomorrow is Indian Tacos and Vendor Day in the Bistro. Thank you all for coming, and you all have a great day.